Hello, and welcome to the Zentangle Project Pack number 16. This project pack will help us celebrate the holiday season with our 2021 12 Days of Zentangle. Woo woo! And this year we'll be exploring some techniques that play with dimension. Join us as we make fanciful ornamental objects that bring a festive flair to the holiday season and the coming year.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
As usual, we'll be using the materials from our Project Pack 16 envelopes, which you can purchase from Zentangle.com and from some of our certified Zentangle teachers. If you don't have a project pack, we invite you to follow along with whatever materials that you might have available to you. So join us either way. And we definitely recommend watching the Project Pack number 16 introduction video prior to this. And that has a lot more information about the tools and what you're going to need and kind of the background.
Just a couple of little extras.
Yeah. Other than that, most of these videos can be viewed in any order. The project or lesson we're going to be doing today is piggybacking on the previous lesson. So we worked on a black Zendala exploring some Pangea, and we're going to be sort of combining that tile with this one, but they really can be done.
They can stand alone.
Yeah, they can stand alone. So either way works. So ready to rock and roll, Martha?
I'm ready.
I don't know if we said that. You're Martha.
I am, and you're Molly.
Yes! Here we go. Rock on. So as we said, we have our Project Pack 16 envelope here, and here's the materials I'm going to be using for this little lesson. I have a white Zendala, and I have, oh, sorry about that. And I have a couple of pen, well, I have one pen here, a black PN, and then graphite pencil, charcoal white pencil, and the corresponding tortillons. So here we go. Just gonna move that a little bit so you don't have that crack in there. Okay. So I am going to be playing with a tangle called Aura Knot, and I think I'll write that down for you guys so you can...
Or not.
Aura Knot. This was a tangle that we actually had a little...
Oh, right, it was a contest.
Yeah.
Naming contest.
It was, and that's the one that was chosen. I think it's kind of a fun name. So as usual, we like to take a moment in the beginning once we have all our materials ready, kind of have ourselves organized, we have our space kind of in a place that feels good. I, at that point, invite all of you to sort of recognize with me the first step in the Zentangle method, and that is gratitude and appreciation. And for me, it's just a good time to sort of allow my whole process to sort of settle for a minute, and it slows me down. It allows me to, a lot of times, put a little smile on my face, because I sort of have this moment where I'm thinking about what I'm grateful for at that moment, and perhaps it's just the time I have to create, or the people I'm with, or the things that I have available to me. But mostly it's just for the ability and the time. So I invite you to recognize that moment before your practice and give yourself that space to sort of recognize your breath and just kind of energize yourself for the time ahead. So when you're ready, I invite you to, if you had your eyes closed, maybe gently open them or bring your focus to, and turn your tile over so you have the blank side up. And I am going to also be using a square tile right now just to help me kind of like meter out my tile here. So I have a square tile I'm just using sort of help me measure, and I know there was one in there. So if you don't have a square tile, you might have a different way to do this, but a square tile works really well. So if you can see, I just sort of placed my Zendala on top of the square tile, so there's like equal little nubbins showing through, and this is a great way to just create 4 equal separations on your Zendala, and I'm just gonna mark them with my graphite pencil. And then I'm going to turn my Zendala so that, and this is just a guess, you don't have to be exactly right, this is just we say ish, like sort of a good way to, I'm gonna turn it so those graphite lines are about halfway in between. Those little nubbins like that, can you see that? And then I'm gonna mark them all again. And this is just a way to create sort of 8 equal points. And they don't have to be exact because we're just playing around here, so. And then you can put your square tile aside. So I'm going to actually switch over to my pen. And this is just sort of prep work to sort of give our aeronaut some tethering. All right, so now that I have those dashes to sort of ground or space out my aeronaut a little bit, I'm going to use those as a place to sort of start and stop my, I guess aeronaut's kind of like a star. So this is how we're gonna do it today. I'm going to have my aeronaut stretch right to the edge of this tile, and I'm gonna use these little tick lines as a way to create these V shapes. And as long as you start and stop on those tick lines, you can kind of go as deep or as shallow as you want. But this just allows us to sort of play with the same amount of points and allow it to go right to the edges. But I like sort of a little wonkiness, so I'm playing with different shapes or different size V shapes, but as long as they start and stop at the tick lines, kind of have a playful thing going on. All right, so we have kind of a wonky fun star there. I think that'll work. Does that work for you, Mark?
I think I like the wonkiness of it.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Then we agree.
It makes me happy.
So aeronaut it's kind of fun. It's sort of, to me, it's like, it was like as if a tangle wanted to be a Celtic knot, but then it decided to go off on its own and become something else. And I'm really proud that it went off on its own and had such an independent streak. So it did its own thing. It's not so complicated, but it has its own complexities in its way. So here, let's have some fun. So I'm actually going to start with this right here. So what we're going to start with is we're going to look at these different, like say, peaks, right? And we're going to create some connecting lines here by sort of avoiding one peak. So I'm going to take off and land with this side of this peak, and I'm going to go straight across this one right here and create a line. So just watch me for a minute here. I'm going to trace over that line for a second, and then I'm going to land on this one as if we're going to kind of trying to seamlessly bring that line over to this one. And then I'm going to actually aura that line. Turning my tile if you need to, the whole line all the way over to here. Okay? It's kind of a funny thing, right? So now I'm going to move to the next peak. I'm going to look at this line right here. I'm going to skip over that, and I'm going to connect, almost like you're kind of drawing a line to seal off that peak, but in a way it's like you're kind of taking off and landing. So imagine this, we're trying to make this a complete line right here, and I'm going to Now aura this line, but because there's one previously drawn there, we're going to simply pick up our pen for a second and have it go underneath. You gotta take your time with this one, okay? It's a fun one to learn though. So if you're new to this, I do suggest maybe just watching. All right, so now I'm playing with this peak right here. I'm looking at this line right here, and this needs to go, we're gonna avoid this peak, and we're gonna go all the way to over to here. So you just wanna visualize this line going all the way over to here. Now we're going to create an aura on that, almost to create it like a band, right? All right, let's turn our tile. So now we're going in order. We did this one first, this one second, we're doing this one third. Okay. This is the line right here. Where do we want it to go? We want it to go over here. So it gets kind of wonky because you're like, okay, how do I make this line kind of elegantly show up over here? Got to use your imagination a little bit. And I like to kind of trace over that landing strip.
It's taking shape.
It's taking shape a little bit, and then we need to aura that. I'm using that same spacing to create these bands. If you need to turn your tile to get the right sort of position on your hand. It's kind of cool, right?
It's really cool.
Take your time. And actually, this is a pretty forgiving tangle. If you kind of put it in the wrong space, it's almost like nobody even knows. So I've done that before too. So now we're gonna be working with this next triangular peak here. And this is the line, and I wanna connect it to this one right here. So it's pretty straightforward. We get that one right there. And then we're gonna aura it. Now you can understand the name is actually quite fitting. All right, so we got this one next here. It's got to get to this. It's almost like it's crossing over one of these sort of triangular peak shapes. And then the aura to create the band. All right, so here's another kind of wonky one because we went a little crazy. So this line right here, it has to get over to here and kind of seem like it was supposed to do that. So you might need to put a little curve in your line for it to get there. And now this aura is going to have to mimic that curve. And now we have one more to go. So we have this line here. We're skipping over this peak right here. Let's see here. And then, all right, so what's fun about this ornament is we're actually going to use it as a reticula. You can do a little bit of searching around. There's some tutorials on ornament. You can see where you can actually just fill it with more auras and create a really cool tangle as a monotangle, but we're gonna use this ornament structure as a reticula to hold some other tangles. So let's go ahead and see what we can do.
Thank you, Molly. I love this wonky playground we have here to play in with our next tangles. I am going to work in the center here, and I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with sort of a spoken framework. Spoken is another tangle you can look up. And this is kind of a fun one to do in these radiating formats here. So I'm gonna eyeball the center of this tile here and draw an orb. And then this orb is going to guide all of my spokes, hence spoken. And the way I'm going to do this is with a takeoff and land stroke. And depending on whichever you're comfortable with, you can either draw your spokes making a curve in this direction or in this direction, and either one is correct, but you just want to be doing it consistently. So perhaps you're left-handed and you want to go in one direction. I am going to do mine in this direction, so you can watch me first. And I take off from the circle and land in each one of these crevices here that this beautiful knot has formed for us. So I'm taking off and landing, going in a clockwise direction, so I'm going to move my tile in the same direction. And then going to do it again. I'm going to take off and land in this crevice. And again, reacting to our unique, each of us will have a unique space. And this is just a small spoke. Take off and land. So now we have this fun pinwheel effect going on. And then to further define the space, I'm going to draw an aura inside each one of these segments. And the aura space you'll want to keep consistent. Taking your time. With deliberate strokes. And turning your tile each time. Already this tile is taking on this complicated illusion where a passerby might say, whoa, how impossible is this? So to embellish this further, I'm going to add some orbs in these spaces that are left. And I'm going to, as we often do with orbs in Zentangle, I'm going to smush them into this space as if I was putting a Nerf ball into a space that it didn't quite belong in. So starting in the center, I'm going to start with an orb. And the next one is going to grow off of that, but again, bumping up to the edges. Squeezing itself in. All the way to the last bit, and then inking in those little spaces that the orb just couldn't fit into. Maybe there's one little one here.
So we're going to do that in every one of these segments that we've created. Remember, we create a whole little orb here, and then the rest grow off of that one that's already drawn. We ink in these little spaces, and it helps define where those orbs are living, if you will. You know, sometimes when we get caught up in these new lessons, we want more, we want to learn new things, and all of that remains true, but also simple strokes have a place in all of our work. And it's these simple, wide open spaces that give us more opportunity for shading and further tangling. Orbs are handy this way. They can adapt and bend, conform. Now there's several opportunities for further tangling, and I think what I'm going to do is go to the outer edges here and add another aura, just like we did inside of the spoken. So I'm going right to the edge on either side. All right, so we have a new space here to work in, and I'm going to do sort of a variation on crescent moon here in the corners. To me, it's just begging for that little shape right there in the corner. And of course, always having an opportunity to add a little ink to our tiles, some heavier ink, or what we refer to as drama. So here's my beginning, and then I will add an aura, a little bit of a secondary theme going on here, and another aura. In this second band, I'm going to ink in as well. And another. And now I'm going to do a wider band here, a little bit wider. And inside this band, I'm just going to add some simple lines. And even with these simple lines, I turn my tile so the lines will radiate outward. And I may just add one more layer here. So we have this little fan effect that started with a crescent moon. And I'm going to work my way around the aura knot, adding these details. For a lot of us, this time of year can be pretty hectic in a wonderful way. But if you are able and joining us right now in December, in the middle of some craziness, and preparations and
I commend you for taking the time for yourself and in turn for those around you, because you're bringing calm and peacefulness and joy that's certainly contagious. And whether you completed each one of these little embellishments one at a time, or if you traveled around the Zendala, adding one element at a time, we all end up at the end in the same way, but our own way, and what feels comfortable for us. So I thought I would add just another little playfulness to each one of these with some just quick little lines, almost as if these bands continue to radiate from under that aura space we created, like eyelashes, if you will. And you'll see that I'm just doing these quick little strokes, inconsistent, but playing around with different pressures on my pen. Just adding a lightness. It's fun to practice different techniques, each tool offering so much more than just one type of line. Doesn't really matter if each one lines up with a corresponding stroke. You get the same type of impression. So I might just add a little dazzle, because I can, with this silver pen I have over here. It's just want to wake it up a little bit. There's a few things that I can, well, there's endless number of things, right? But I think what I'll do is I'll create a bit of a Knightsbridge effect here on my little, just adding little squares of silver so that my band, can you see it? That little band now has a checkerboard on it. And it's just a way of breaking up the black. You could leave it black also. And perhaps this center we could fill in, because why not? There. And I think Molly would like to add something to this tile. We've got a lot more space to fill in.
Okay, thank you, Martha. That looks so pretty already. You have so graciously left me these beautiful little triangular spaces left, and I think I'm going to do something fairly simple in there. But I'm going to start off doing every other one, and then I can decide if I want to put something different in the leftovers, or if I want to just do the same thing in every one. So I'm going to do sort of like a munch-in fragment, I guess you could call it, where I'm just going to start from the point and pull down strokes towards the baseline here. Just real basic, but it'll add a nice, I think, touch. And kind of starting off with a light touch and then finishing off down there. If you want to weight the bottom a little more, you can. Just a basic, and like I said, I'm going to do every other one to start off. See how that looks and decide if I want to do something different in the other ones. And then I think I actually am going to play around with something a little different here, just to sort of give it a little punch. I think I'm going to just do some striping, because I feel like it needs a little more let's say contrast. So I'm going to go into the other ones, and I'm just going to add a fat, kind of bold stripe that has a little curve. You can play around with the shading on that. Sometimes you just need to look at the composition and how it's evolving and what it needs. Like a little ink will be good here. Yeah, and I think I like how the horizontal stripe kind of acts with the vertical ones. It kind of has a little whimsy to it. So go ahead and put some striping in all of the remaining triangles. Okay, so I have filled in all those remaining triangular spaces with my striping, and I think I'm good with all the ink I have down here. I'm enjoying the remaining sort of space as just a visual break, and kind of having a little bit of fun with how this ornament played out. So I'm going to start to add some graphite to sort of try to create some dimension with how this tangle weaves and how the other tangles are interacting with it. So I'm going to start by tangling my ornament, and I'm going to sort of recognize these overlapping, I guess, parallel little bands or bars. And I'm just going to simply add a nice graphite bit where it appears to be overlapping. And I'll just show you sort of right away what with the tortillon, just kind of like creating a nice dark shadow, and then just kind of inviting it in a little bit. So already you can see that. So I'm going to go around and do that to all of the ornament. Remember, you can pause the video at any point in time. You can watch it, you can go back, and that's what's great about these videos, is that you don't have to rush or try to be at the same speed I'm going. In fact, the video sometimes skips ahead just to save time on some of the steps. So just, process what's happening and then go at it in your own way. So just by going around and sort of playing with that overlap right there, you definitely bring some dimension to the ornament. And then if you want to also just put a little shadow where near the tip where it seems to be overlapping, go ahead and do that too. Remember, there's all kinds of options here, so don't think there's only one way to do this. The only, trick I encourage folks with shading is to make sure that you allow ample shaded areas and unshaded areas. And that's really the only trick. So as long as you have highlight and shadow, then you get that contrast that creates dimension. And just remember to breathe. Take your time. I'm just playing around with these orbs on the inside, and I'm just starting off by adding a little bit of graphite here in the points. Again, there's plenty of different ways you could approach this. Start off with just the point part. And then I think I'm gonna just, with these bigger orbs, maybe play around with just a little bit of shadow, just to get that highlight in the middle. Sometimes you just need to put a little on there, and then you can play around with it with the tortillon. So I think I have most of these orbs kind of shaded here. And again, the trick is to make sure you leave those little highlights there to get the definition. Now I'm going to go into my triangular spaces, and with the, I think with this one, let's see, I could either play around with putting something in the point here or something over at the bottom, and I'm going to choose the bottom. So I think you guys can probably hear my chickens in the background. All right. And then with the striping, I'm just going to play with a hard shadow on either side. I'm going to go around and do that to all of these points. All right, so I'm just kind of putting some finishing touches down here. You can always add your graphite in layers if you were like, oh, I need a little darker there or whatnot, but the shading really makes this whole thing pop. I think I'm going to add one last bit of shading right right on the outside of these, just kind of to complement that, those little, I guess they're like eyelashes or fringe. I'll go around and kind of add that to each one of those spaces. All right, so I think that I'm good with my shading. I'm kind of enjoying all the little contrasty bits. If you want to go in and add, you know, any emphasis here and there, now's the time to do it. And now I'm going to do some sort of finishing here. Before I get to that point, I am going to put a chop on there, so I encourage you to sign your work too. So and once you have your chop on there, we are just going to play around with a fun way to display this Zendala along with the Zendala we did yesterday. If you would rather keep this separate and display it a different way, totally optional. We're just trying to show you guys ideas, and you can go with it or not. So watch this one kind of way to finish off our tile. So I have this tile all done. I have my chop on the front, and I'm going to assemble it with the tile we did yesterday. And then, which let me find it. I have it right here. So here's the tile we did yesterday. So fun. And the idea is that we're going to put it back to back with this tile, and we're going to put some string in between the two tiles with the Mod Podge, and then allow ourselves to sort of hang it. So I think what I'd like to do, this one's already Mod Podged on one side. So at this point in time, I'm going to Mod Podge the back of it, put the string in between. I'm using just a thin twine, but I had a ribbon here too. You could do a ribbon, whatever you want. It should be pretty thin. You don't want it to be thick because we're sandwiching it, and we don't want it to kind of create like a major lump in our artwork. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a thin layer of Mod Podge on the back of this one, so I can put my string and my other Zendala. And I like to just squirt a little bit on. Some people like to squirt it onto a little dish or plate, and then I really want enough Mod Podge on there to get all the surface. And as you can see, I have a scrap piece of paper here I'm working on top of so I don't get glue all over my table. Mod Podge is both a glue and a sealer or whatever you, I mean, it has all kinds of fun. I've been using Mod Podge for years. And all kinds of fun decoupage things you can do. All right, so I think I have a fair amount there. I am going to, I'm using this thin twine, but like I said, you could put a ribbon here, anything you want. I'm gonna just double check to see what direction this Zendala is going in. All right, so I have it facing the right way, only because that one is a little bit directional. The Oranaut one doesn't really matter as much. So I'm gonna put my string down here, or it sticks a little bit, and put this other Zendala over. You're gonna wanna put a lot of pressure down on here. And you gotta make sure you got plenty of Mod Podge on there because you really want it to stick. So it might kind of squirt out the sides, and that's fine because we're gonna be Mod Podging the other side too. You might even put it under a book or something like that to dry, just to get nice glue surface on the whole thing. Okay, so I've waited for my 2 Zendalas to dry, and I'm gonna add a second, or I'm gonna add a layer of Mod Podge on top of this Zendala. You could have done that first, then connected them both together, but it doesn't really matter. I just encourage you to do one step at a time and allow the dry time in between, because there's always room for you to wait and then have at least one dry surface to play around with. So that's my only recommendation, is just do one surface at a time and then wait for it to dry and then go back, because then you can at least put your fingers on a dry area. And Mod Podge can go down in a lot of thin layers, so if you miss a spot, you can go back and put another layer on top. So better to just put thin coats down, wait, and then add some more. You get like a little chunk in your Mod Podge, just brush it off. So many different ways you could do this too. You could use little ribbons. You could also just Mod Podge the two together and then maybe hole punch a hole at the top and hang it, you know, with a string. That way you don't have to sandwich the string in there or the ribbon in there. And once you have the string on there, it's nice because you can hang it to dry. So, like I said, put some finishing touches on there. Let it dry. Maybe notice if there's some spots you left off and you can add more to it later. Enjoy, have fun with this. Try it a couple different ways. Thank you so much for joining us. We had fun. Take care. We'll see you soon.